Okay, hello and welcome to our webinar where we are going to be learning about engaging language learning through innovative EdTech. I'm really excited for this one. I've got two special guests joining me. So the first one is Nilan Bateman. Hi Nilan, how are you?
Hello, good morning or afternoon.
Afternoon, yeah, afternoon here, morning for you. And then I've also got Jerome Noyes. Hi Jerome, how are you?
Hello, I'm very good. How are you doing? All good?
Yeah, good, thank you. So it's lovely to have you both here. Would you mind both introducing yourselves? Nilan, did you want to start? Just a little brief bit about you.
Sure. My name is Nalan Bateman. That is a new last name. It was formerly Taylor,
Oh,
but I
exciting.
am 5 months in of marriage now. And I have recently relocated from Louisiana to Colorado. So this is my new home. And my background is pretty much in the classroom. I was a high school Spanish teacher for 13, 14 years, and then moved into the role of a technology trainer and also an English language coach for about the past 3 years that I was in the district. And really had an opportunity to kind of flip the switch of just teaching Spanish to now engaging with more multilingual learners and families and just all of our stakeholders. So I'm really passionate about technology and languages, and I'm a lover of languages myself. I speak English, of course, is my native language, but Spanish and learning Portuguese and French is there, somewhere far there. So just excited to be here and to share all of the tools that we've been able to use and have success with.
Brilliant. It sounds like you've had a lot of changes in recent times as well.
Very.
So very exciting. What about you, Jerome? Could you introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, so my name is Jerome Noguez. As you may hear, I'm French, but I've been living in England for over 20 years. I've been teaching languages for quite a large amount of time, I would say 20 plus years also. I've always been involved in tech. I've been head of digital learning also in different places, but from the beginning, I always started using tech in languages. I think it was always lovely to mix it up and to find these exciting little things extra to make the children learn and the pupils. So that's something I've always been super interested in. So there we go. And I'm based in Shrewsbury, Shropshire at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, well, fantastic. Oh, it's so a pleasure to have you both on. So the first question that I wanted to explore is, what are the benefits of learning a language? So Jerome, did you want to start?
Of course, many obviously benefits to be learning languages. So first of all, when you're learning languages, you open up your mind a little bit. I think that's very. You open up to new cultures, so you don't see things the same way in the same through the same sieve. I would say you have several colanders to go through it and see different things. It's good for memory. You're working on both sides of your brain. It's good for multitasking sometimes, and I think and when you get a little bit older, when you learn languages, I think it really slows things down in terms of decay of your brain, and I think that's really, really important too. What else? I think is amazing to be bilingual, trilingual. Sometimes people speak more than that. It's a gift.
Yeah.
I think it opens up things to, and when you go and visit a country, I think there's nothing better than speaking to locals and try to get the best out of the town. So going through the guide, you're always going to be sent in the right directions, in the right cafe or the right places to do that. That's one of these things, and it's just really being part of the culture, learning new things. It's the Spanish culture, the South American culture, the French, or any countries is always so exciting. The literature, the films, the food, especially the food. You're like going to Japan. Yeah, I think it's such. I think it's a gift to be able to speak languages, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, and I think you're right. You can really embrace yourself in the culture, can't you? If you really understand that language, and there's a lot of benefits there. What about you, Nalan? Anything to add to that? I know Jerome listed quite a few benefits.
Yes,
I'm
I
sure
love
you've got
it.
some too.
For sure. I love the part, especially about it just being a gift, because sometimes I sit back and I used to tell my students a long time ago. So now I'm no longer in the classroom, of course, and trying to figure out what exactly that I would like to do with it. And so kind of a benefit of language learning or language acquisition really is just being able to expand your community, being able to connect with other people. Just like he's saying, I mean, we're expanding, we're learning about more cultures, but now look how many ways you can communicate with others who aren't necessarily like you. I mean, you are finding a way to connect, but it is through language now, which is very beautiful. And so now here, my new role, I was trying to dabble in a little bit of interpreting now and maybe seeing what I could do for the court or just for the state itself and just translations as well. So language opportunities are all around. They exist because we live in a very expanding type state. We live in a global community. And so we want to be able to communicate with everybody. But just the gift of just connection. I think everybody longs for that, right? Especially after the pandemic and all of that we had
Yeah.
of just being disconnected. So everybody with language learning, in my opinion, is really looking to bridge gaps and forge communities, which is it's exciting. Yeah.
No, I love that. That's really beautiful, and I
Mhm.
think it can be a way to help people as well. And because obviously you said you want to use it in some different ways, like with the call and
Right.
things. So it can be a way to really help others too by doing that interpreting that you were talking about.
Even professionally, I think when we're trying to sell languages to the pupils, and it's really helpful to be speaking different languages, because obviously it opens up the world for you, doesn't it? If you can speak Spanish or Italian or whatever, like German, whatever language you speak, you have that extra bit on your CV, which is going to help you
Yeah.
out to be getting the jobs, because you have that that
Correct.
opportunity to know that stuff. So it really helps out, and in getting interviews and getting jobs also.
Hmm.
Yeah, global opportunities that
Yeah.
you might not have otherwise. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, those are all so good. I knew that you'd both have some good benefits, but I didn't expect it to be so many. So that's a really great start. I love it. So kind of going on to this then, how can we encourage students to be interested in learning languages, especially when we've got things now, for example, like AI translation and things like that, where it might kind of push some students to maybe be a little bit more, I don't know, kind of lazy about it, I can just get it to translate it for me. I don't need to learn it myself.
Mhm.
How would you encourage them to actually be interested in learning it themselves? Nilan, did you want to start?
Sure. I think that one is a little tricky because everybody's passions and the things that excite us or motivate us to do different things are very different. And so I worked a lot with high school students, and then eventually I got a chance to work with, of course, adults, right? And then the littles. So seeing everybody's ideas or light bulbs kind of click when they had an opportunity to do something else, it shifted, right? From different age
Yeah.
groups. So some of the things that I would try to do at that point were, I know that I had an opportunity to study abroad when I was in college. And so I stayed for a year in the Dominican Republic, and that kind of shifted my world. But even before then, I'm not really sure where that desire came from to want to speak another language. Maybe because I heard it so much. My father is West African, and so I heard his language and speaking with family members, and so maybe that sparked something. And so since students really don't have that type of exposure, I can't take everybody on a plane and go stay for a week or 2 weeks or a
Yeah.
semester abroad. And so I would try to bring those things into the classroom or into our learning environment. And so I think that was a way to increase exposure with different videos or even different friends or connections that I had made with speaking Spanish. We would have guests come in, we would have people just come and talk to our students or even do things virtually. And that to me would kind of spark engagement. And sometimes different projects too, like I would say, hey, you can go to the grocery store up the street and go to one of our Spanish speaking stores or go to the international market and just practice what it is that you've had, or even using one of the tools that we have. And sometimes I think even though we have this new, well, not as new because we know that it's been around for a while, right? AI, but we're just now getting into the gist of really accepting that it's been there. But I even encourage students to use that technology too against what it is that you've already learned. What are the
Yeah.
similarities? What are the differences? What do you think that you may have needed to correct when you're speaking with somebody else? And so just I think that the key word that Jerome mentioned earlier was just exposure, right, to other things. And I just want to enhance that. You want to give students as much exposure, and even adults, because a lot of times a lot of adults really don't know what other communities surround us, right? Like who else is around us to be able to connect with. And we have so many to
Yeah.
be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love the idea of getting them to use AI and
Hmm.
to kind of against what they've learned as well. I think that's a really good way to look at it. What about you, Jerome? What would you add?
Yeah, I think I think we're going to discuss that. The advantages of using AI later on in as a question, I believe. But it's uh, it's not mechanical. Learning a language. I think again, you need to.
Hmm.
It's not a translation that you want to do. You don't want to just translate. You want to get a message across. Obviously, there will have to be some translation exercises, but the point is communicating with people. I always say to the pupils in my class, say, in 10 years' time, you're not going to be writing a letter to a pen pal or something and describing your pets and talking about yourselves and stuff. What are you going to be doing? You are going to be going and you're going to speak to people. You're going to be going to a shop. You're going to be watching a film maybe later on. You're going to be going to an art gallery and try to understand what's going on there. So it's just putting things into context. And I really like
Mm.
the fact that you cannot do a cooking session, for example, and with AI yet. Anyway, so what I love doing things with food, for example. There, and I
Mm.
used to be
Okay,
taking.
that's interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important, and food is central in not in my
Mm.
teaching, but it's really part of it. And I like getting my pupils to be baking or something, or I like to be doing,
Mm.
and we do that. And my sixth formers last year, we were I lucky because I was quite a small bunch of them, and we took the four of them. Went to the house, and we started baking something, and we actually created a three-course meal in French, all in French, with
Mm.
French music on, stuff like that. That's really cool. And just discovering food and via cinema and via
Mm.
via music.
Mm.
AI
Yeah.
cannot help you. It can mechanically do something for you and translate the text, and you get the meaning of the
Mm.
text, but you wouldn't get the nuances, for example, in that too.
Mm.
Or so I think there's much to it. Obviously, AI is very useful in many ways to understand a text or
Mm.
something else, but also you don't want the pupils to be going into direction and say, oh, well, I'm going to ask AI to be translating for me. So you have to change the
Mm.
tasks so they don't do that and don't get that because they're over reliant on it. And that's not the point
Yeah.
either. Yeah.
Correct. I
No.
like that. I think that it's
Yeah.
there's a way to be able to introduce any type of technology into a learning environment so that people are not necessarily afraid of it, but embrace the use of it and understand how to use it with their culture, understand how to use it with the classroom environment or whatever the learning
Mm.
environment may be, so that we can enhance the learning environment. Because eventually,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what AI is supposed to be able to do. I mean, we're still working on all the kinks, and nothing is perfect, and nothing is going to replace a teacher or the human effect in the classroom. However, I believe that you can't be afraid of it, and they're going to find it anyway. It's almost just like when
Yeah.
Microsoft Translator tool or Google
So
Translate
true.
come on in the classroom. It's just like, oh well, they're going to try to figure out everything. But you, as a teacher, you know your students' capabilities or their levels already. So why not increase them with the use of AI? To say, hey,
Mm.
I know what it is that you can do. I know that this may not be your work. Let's try to implement a little bit of this so that you can see how to enhance what it is that you're doing, right? And then that way they're more receptive of it, right? More prone to be able to use it properly. That's what we want. We want
Mm.
digital citizenship, right?
I
Yeah.
totally agree with that. You need to, as you said, it's got to be enhancing the learning. That's what's
Yeah,
important, isn't it? And your
Mm.
AI will not be reciting beautifully your poem, for example, stuff
exactly.
like that.
Mm.
So
That's true.
it's very different, isn't it?
Another passion
So
of yours,
you'll be
Yeah,
yeah, you
poetry.
get a passion behind you, and you will be saying the text, reading the text, but you don't get like the acting bit or
exactly.
putting
Mm.
something
So you've
through,
got
isn't it?
emotion
So
and the
yeah,
feeling.
Right,
the emotion's not going to
right.
be there, isn't it? So yeah, you're
Mhm.
absolutely right.
Yeah. So kind of going as we've kind of gone into AI a little bit then, should we have a look at a bit more into what are some of the pros and cons of using AI tools in language learning?
Hmm. I would say one of the pros definitely is maybe having somebody else think for you.
Yeah.
But it can also be a con. I mean, AI is exciting because I use it personally, just to figure out how it would look in the classroom or in the learning environment.
Mm.
And so I've been studying Portuguese for the past 3 years, right? And I have a tutor, and so she is Brazilian, and we get online every week or so, right? And have about an hour and a half worth of class time, instruction, whatever. And it's very different. But she introduced me to a couple of tools because obviously conversation is already there and that builds over time. But I have a
Mm.
few that I look at now, and it's just like, well, that's interesting. Like you can plug in a prompt, or supposedly it'll give you a different scenario, and then you get a chance to talk back in that target language to figure out
Mm.
what it says, or it can correct you. And so with that, I kind of pushed it a little bit, right? Because I was just like, is it really going to work? Or what kind of
Yeah.
response are they going to give me? And so I asked something about, I think I did the taxi one, or talking about hobbies, right? So it
Mm.
says, well, explain what some of your hobbies are and what it is that you would like to do. And so I was just like, oh yeah, well, I enjoy going to church on Sundays, and we spend time to do this or whatever and to read. And I asked the question back because I'm thinking it's going to be able to respond or tell me something. And so I asked my question, and I think I said, well, what is it that you like to do, or do you go to church too, or and so the response was just like, I think I can help you practice more, but I'm really here to help figure out what you'd like to do, and something like that. So I know that the
Yeah.
responses are not. I think I read a different article somewhere. The responses are still somewhat human generated. Like they sat down with humans, of course, and like interviewed different people to
Yeah.
give them what kind of scenarios would be. But it's still, it doesn't
It's
have
not the
that.
same as a dialogue, though, I guess.
Exactly, right. So I was
Although
trying to
it is
push it
useful for your
before.
practicing, I guess, like you say. So
Exactly,
it's,
right. So just kind of kept practicing specific conversations, but you can only get so far. You can only do so much. So just a personal
Yeah, that's really
experience of me trying to
interesting.
do it instead of with students, just to
Yeah,
figure out what it looks like, because we should model it first anyway, as far as
absolutely.
instruction goes, and we can learn together too. I think that's another part of just being vulnerable in the classroom or just with instruction. So it's a way of, hey, I don't know about all this stuff. You guys are going to be, and I used to do that with my students all the time, the littles, the bigs, and the adults, hey, we're going to guinea pig this together. I am learning this along with you. If somebody else figures out something before I do, or if you figure out you've got a handle on this, share with the group and let's keep it going. So I think that puts them in control too of their own learning and their own experience.
Yeah, I love that.
As for me, the positives, it's the personalized learning. So you could have, obviously, you have access. I don't want to give any names, but you have different platforms you can use, and which you create some bots, and you can have then create to the tailor them to your pupils, for example. That can work on their certain topics and things that they can work with these and tailor them to their level. So you have some excellent pupils, you can stretch them a little bit. You can some pupils are maybe not as good, and you can create something which is going to help. Obviously, you're there too, but that's an extra help for the AI. I think it's a good one. What you have also, you have instant feedback, which I think is very important too. So if you're using these bots, for example, or if you're using some other apps, for example, say I have to mention a big one, the Microsoft, for example. If you go onto a certain bit of Teams, for example, there, because of the learning accelerators, you can actually speak something and it will correct your pronunciation, which is pretty amazing. So you have things like that. So and it's what I like is the adaptive learning. Okay, that you can use that with AI. Obviously, it's, I think, in my opinion, that's one of these exciting things you can do with that for tailor for your pupils.
Yeah, I really like that. I love the idea of the personalized learning aspects, especially because although obviously you're there as well, you can't be everywhere at once, and it means that the pupils can still be making progress and getting support while you're working with other pupils in the classroom, and you can stretch and challenge them. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Yes, we didn't come up with any cons yet, huh? I guess, or maybe the
maybe
pros
just
can
trying to get
actually
through
be
everything
cons
for you.
too. Right. Yeah. I love that. I love instant feedback because I feel like we all crave that, and not necessarily in the form of a teacher to tell me, hey, you did this right, or you said this correctly, or this can be, this can be changed. But I do like the fact that if I plug something in, let's just say that I'm at a more advanced class and I have them write something, right? So they write out a paragraph or write out a different essay, and then they plug it into one of the AI tools, right? Into ChatGPT or whatever, and then, or Copilot, and you ask them to correct it. I think that's pretty good as far as instant feedback, but then it's almost just like, why I couldn't do that. So catch 22, for all of them. Yeah.
What would you say for for the cons then? Because obviously there's lots of pros, like you said, but what would be some of the...
For the cons, I do think that obviously AI, you don't want to be over reliant on AI again. You have to make sure that that's one of these super important ones. That's the cons. You don't want that to get the children or pupils, whatever level you teach at, and just go straight where they have a homework to do or whatever, and just go straight, I'm not going to be bothered. I'd rather play video games or something. I'll do that very, very quickly. And it's what I keep telling them. But I think we have to tailor that to the class. You shouldn't be asking these days to the class to be doing something in which they're going to be using AI, or if they do, you have to just do some comparisons or something which is going to be very helpful. So they create something or you get some feedback for something, but you must avoid these type of things where they're going to be using it for using it without any thoughts about
Right.
things
Any
working and stuff
guidance.
like that.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, otherwise it's just wasting time really. It's just like people
Yeah.
calculating what they're going to be doing using calculator before when they're not allowed to be using that. It's exactly the same. So I think
That's true, yeah. It's,
yeah.
it's not the only tech that gets misused, I'm
No,
sure.
of course not. I think people very often compare, the calculator. They started by that and they say, oh, it's going to be ruining everything. But you use it
Yeah.
at the right time and the right moment. Big numbers, you have to be using calculators to be doing things. So if you know times tables, it's okay. So if you know your verbs, in whatever language, you should be able to be working out your translation. So it's
Right.
just we have to create a good tasks and for good tasks for our pupils, make sure that we use technology in the right way. And I would say AI sometimes they struggle a little bit with idiomatic expressions. They might not be so good at getting the meaning behind something that teachers could be getting. So I think that will be one of these things.
I'm glad that you said that. I should have went to go grab that book. I have some friends. I just ended up going to a conference this past spring or this past summer. It was ISTE conference
Oh,
in the
yeah,
state.
of
It was here in
course.
Colorado,
Yeah.
right? International Society of Technology and Education. And
Yeah,
so
some of the team went there actually from
oh,
NetSupport.
yay.
Yeah.
So a pretty big conference. I had a few presentations
Yeah.
there, but I ended up getting a few books too. And so one of the books that I picked up was I know Matt Miller has his about AI in the classroom, but then there are two authors, Ken Shelton and Dee Lanier, and there is I have the book in the other room. I should have went to go grab it.
You can go and
And
get it if you want.
so there were actually two. Well, here's the one from ISTE, right? So this one, The Promises and Perils of AI in Education. Okay. So
Nice.
this one by Ethics and Equity have entered the chat. And so back to what Jerome was saying, we cannot always tell, right, who was necessarily interviewed by AI. So when we're talking about the language or the target language that we speak and we ask them to do that, AI is not going to know all the nuances of different language or places, right? So let's say, for example, I don't know, like I asked them to type something, but it may have given me a slang from Colombia instead of Dominican Republic or Mexico or
Yeah.
any other Spanish speaking country. And so those are the things that AI we don't have control of, right? Because we don't know what it's going to pop out. It's just going to give you a bunch of formulated answers, but we don't know origin. We don't know ethically where it's
And the
coming
data
from.
may
You know
not
what
be
I'm saying?
very
And so
representative as
that
well,
was one.
depending
And
on
so
what's been
this was
put
a
in.
pretty good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I had another huge one. I didn't get all the way into this one, but
That's a
this is
good one.
another one.
Yeah,
AI in
classroom.
the classroom, and this one to artificial and the ultimate guide to artificial intelligence in education by Daniel Fitzpatrick. Right. So this is another cool one to read.
That's the
Nice.
Holy Bible these days. That one, everybody's been reading that
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
I have seen that one mentioned across the internet,
everywhere.
so it is on
Yeah.
my list to look up at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. And ethics is something to consider as well, obviously, and origins and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So kind of coming away from AI then, what EdTech tools should schools have in place that can support language learning? Did you want to start, Jerome?
Yeah, of course. Or it depends what skill. But first of all, as mentioned before, it's got to be bringing something to the classroom. Okay, you're just
Absolutely,
going to
yeah. Have
ask
some value.
the people just to get their tablets out because it's we're going to play. But you want to have some stuff which is going to help learn vocab and make a bit of gamifications and the likes of quizzes and Quizlet and things like that. You want to get some maybe you need to get the apps as mentioned if you work with Microsoft, for example. These it's very, very useful to be working on these learning accelerators where you can actually read a text and you have some feedback. I'll do that a lot with when I run my poetry competition. I tell the people to be using these to be controlling. Obviously, teachers can help, parents can help. They speak the language, but sometimes just record yourself and will tell you what mistakes you have made in your pronunciation, and that's pretty amazing. So you have that, and after you have You have all sorts of apps you can use for whatever you want, for listening and stuff like that. And AI is actually very useful to create some stuff with a comprehensible input. So with vocab that you've actually been working with, and I've been working quite a bit with videos and creating images with AI, having them animated with some text so they can actually speak. So you have an actual character which actually speaks a paragraph on something, and the pupils have to guess or have to answer questions about that. So it sounds really great because the TTS, the text to speech, is really impressive. They can do that. So there's lots of tools that you can use as a teacher. AI is one of them in this case. But obviously, you have lots of EdTech tools for the quizzes, and you can use Microsoft to work with the pupils, and also you can check their marks and their assignments online and stuff like that. You can use that with Google, I suppose, too. All these type of things, I think, going to be very useful to develop all these skills and to gamify maybe your lessons to make them a bit more enticing and stuff like that. So you create a bit of enthusiasm, competitive. Yeah, people are getting a bit more competitive in class too. And when we've got competitions, I always the old packet of Haribos in my bag, and I'm just like, well done, you won that one, so you can get a couple of sweets or something if you're allowed to do that in your school. Usually that works very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also loved when you wrote an article for Rise, you wrote a bit about accessibility tools that you could use to help language learning as well, and I thought that was really insightful.
Accessibility, of course. I can say more about accessibility, but you go ahead.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be the only one talking.
No, it's great. I love it. I love it. Yeah. I actually in Louisiana, I came from a Microsoft district, and I've had the opportunity to be an MIE expert, and we have this huge community that I'm saying that we grow, and I had a chance to be a fellow for the community. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. You found fellow expert.
Excellent.
So yeah, I mean,
you should have both mentioned it in your intros.
Yeah.
We should have.
So I love that. I love just the fact of when you make learning inclusive and accessible, it makes everybody want to be a part of that. And I think that Microsoft does a really good job. I haven't used much now because I'm a little bit removed since the spring for the learning accelerator. So I'm not sure about that, but I know that I would give trainings on reading progress, especially for our multilingual learners. And so that was such an amazing tool to be able to see them use. I just wanted to be able to use it more consistently. We had already had, I don't know if you call them deals with the district, but you already, they made promises already with different platforms that they were going to use instead of what we already had in place. I was just like, we could be using this, but sometimes you just go with other platforms because you're thinking that that's going to increase the learning too. But when you get a chance to include and when you get a chance to use what it is that you already have in place, I think that just changes so much. So some of the tools, for example, especially with training and learning that I would use was just the dictate tool with inside of Microsoft, the subtitle feature when you're speaking a language. And I think that's easy for both native speakers and non-native speakers. I think for English native speakers, it gives us the opportunity to understand how it is that we're speaking, to slow it down a little bit inside of the classroom or for presentations so that our students or our learners can understand what is happening. And then the subtitles, then they will do their magic. They can be on any PowerPoint. It doesn't even have to be anything that is made. It can be on a blank screen. So I think that's awesome. Some of the tools that I've been able to use, for example, are some of the ones that you, of course, mentioned. I love Canva. I'm a fan of Canva and just using their magic tool or their AI features that are in there. And they even have the new translate thing that's been out for about a year or so, right? So it translates into several languages too. So you're creating flyers and then all of a sudden you have the words on there, but you just click a button and it's almost just like 10 seconds later, which is amazing. I mean, you can go back and as a professional, you go back and kind of sift through yourself to see if it's good, but
that could be an activity with the students as well. You could say like, I've translated this in Canva. Is it correct? Is it accurate?
Exactly. Right. And so that opens up learning too. I mean, just like Jerome was saying, you do the text to speech tool and you have them using comprehensible input to answer questions and to go back and see what it is that you're talking about or to, just give a simple reply. But then on the flip side, they're also able to use the tool to generate those things themselves. So look how we're extending extending learning, right, and pushing it so that they can take it again into their own hands, right? Like, we're guiding it, of course, as a professional and as an educator in the classroom. I'm facilitating the learning, but I'm also giving you the opportunity to say, hey, I can do this too, or I can really understand what it is that I'm doing with this tool. I went to a webinar yesterday. Wakelet had something like with the App Smash thing, App Smash Festival, and one of my friends on there is Alex Isaacs, Mr. Math, I think he's called on Twitter, Mr. Alex Math.
Sounds familiar.
I always forget. I'll figure it
Yeah.
out. But he did his on Wakelet and Moat. And since we're a Microsoft district, I really didn't know too much about Moat because it's more Google. But I still tuned in. And now my thing is, I wonder if it can be implemented into Microsoft stuff as well. But Moat is just another speaking tool, right? And the beautiful thing about it is you can speak in English and it translates, OMG, into how many ever languages they have ready for you. So it just opens up the door more to be able to connect and communicate. And what would happen if I mean, we can do this in forms, but you still have to be able to share. So no matter how much it is that we're sharing and we're excited about the technology, like excited about AI and the things that you can do, in order to use it successfully or in order to really see it work, you still have to be able to explain to the community that you're sharing it with how to use it. So it's like, since my roles kind of changed and I didn't have to necessarily do it for students anymore, right? Like, I didn't have to create forms for them, or I needed to now do with my community. But how was I going to get my community to see? All you have to do is click a button. Like, all you need to do is be able to click the little speaker with the book open so that it translates into whatever language for immersive reader, or, for whatever it is that you had. And so creating those type of environments so that we can help them utilize what it is that we're using, it just puts everybody in a better place, right? A better place to be able to connect with each other, a better place to be able to share what's going on in the classroom. And then not only are your students using that technology, but guess what? You're using it at home. So it's just like a double whammy. Everybody is using the same type of tools. So I think it's awesome. I just did one the other day. I was sharing at church. We left the other day and they came to run to my husband and I because we met in Dominican Republic studying abroad. And so they came to us and they were just like, hey, we need somebody who speaks Spanish. And so we're hurrying up to go, to the vestibule to go see who is there to be able to help or to interpret. And so we get out there and the person, it is a homeless woman and her family, and she speaks Romanian. Everybody's lost. They pulling out translator, trying to figure out what to do. No offense, no shout out to Google, but Google didn't have it. But guess what I had on my phone? Microsoft Translator app. Does Nalan speak a lick of Romanian? I do not. But was I able to connect with this person that day? I sure did. Interpreted everything. So what would happen if we just shared these type of tools that we had, right? With the people who are in our community to be able to effectively communicate and just love on the people who are around us. That's it.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that. What a wonderful story.
I was just like, OMG.
I
translated
think we've got a lot in commman. Well done.
Yeah.
We got a lot in common with
well
Wakelet also. Wakelet and Canva. I forgot. I wanted to mention Wakelet also, which is a fabulous tool for to help with creating portfolios and ideas. I usually mention that to my sixth formers. And you can create some exciting things with art and just creating some folders with lots of things in there. It's so easy to do. But obviously, we're talking about accessibility and dyslexia, and it's so much easier to be using all these tools like Dictate, for example. You dictate something to the computer if you're going to find it really, really hard to be writing or typing some stuff. You also obviously, if you've got issues with I don't know, with your hands or something, or if you need to be hearing a text, again, you go into Edge or any other browser and you can listen to the text. It's so straightforward. And again, it's the type of things which could be used in the environment of language learning. And I said, if you want to listen to a text, well, put it into this and just listen to it, and you're going to have a proper text to speech, and it's going to work out very nicely. It's not robotic as much these days. I think that the sound is really, really good. There's lots and lots of opportunity there. Dictating is also one of these things which is very good. It's a good one also to text to try on the pronunciation of the pupils. So they have to dictate a passage to see if they pronounce it properly. So
it picks it up. Like,
that's
it's
really
a good
one to do. Another challenge.
Yeah,
That is
I
good.
like
To
that.
dictate it in
I
the
think,
target language. Yeah.
yeah,
That's
I
usually
think
how I
that's
do
amazing.
presentations, and I'm like crossing my fingers that
Yeah.
I don't butcher it.
You
That's
pronounced
awesome.
it okay.
Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that there are those tools that you can use as well to stop those barriers for language learning, because obviously for some people, they might be passionate about it, but if they do have reading or writing difficulties, that can be such a barrier to learning a language. So those tools are so helpful.
That's awesome.
So my next question really was about, obviously, kind of talking more about the community, so thinking about parents. Have either of you got any examples of where you've used technology to reach out to parents who maybe don't have English as a first language, for example? Any kind of things where you've helped in that way?
Yeah, for sure. Let's say, for example, since moving into that role of an English language coach, right, from outside of classroom and then getting a chance to support schools across the district, that was really exciting because it wasn't just training teachers anymore on how to use the tools that we had. And it wasn't just working with students, it was now having to connect with families so that they could understand how to partner with the school district, right, to be able to support their student or their child. And so I was able to, using Wakelet, to create a digital newsletter. And at first I was doing it with the high school, right? Because I was just like, oh, we can get information out this way, because I would man the social media page and I would eventually get students to start creating things themselves in Canva and then learn how to do some things on their own and update that. And so then I figured out with Wakelet, we can create newsletters and I can figure out all the things that are going on at this site or across the district, and then put those things in the target language for the parent. And so they had access to that. So now inside of this one newsletter, and I can put a copy of it and give you a link so they can have that to be able to look at. There's a copy of the access, like how students can access their Clever portal, right? How they would log in and then get to everything that they needed to practice at home. There was access to different events that we had getting ready to go on around campus. Not just PTA meetings or PTO meetings, but ways that parents could actually be involved on campus, right? And see what was happening with their students and their learning, how to better connect with teachers, different websites on how parents could now pick up language themselves, or what we began to offer in the district. And so having those tools, to be able to connect with them was for sure one. So I would definitely say Wakelet and Canva. That was a whole app smash in there. I dibbled and dabbled with Motes barely to put something in. And so, but instead of me, just because I spoke Spanish already, I would just say it in Spanish. But still, I mean, they could still go back and translate it to whatever, because that was our primary language. We did have a few people who spoke Portuguese and very few who spoke Mandarin, I believe. But Spanish was our biggest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really useful to be able to offer those same resources, but just in multiple languages as well.
Yeah, we have working in a boarding school environment, we have a lot of international families. So we have Chinese, Japanese, and all people coming from different areas in the world. So we have the same things, and I worked in several boarding schools. And what happened to be, we've been using Canva. Obviously, you mentioned that before, doing the translated tools, for example, which is very useful, with being checked. For the parents to know what's happening in the boarding houses and stuff. Again, you have your you have the little newsletter. Again, I was talking about that. You mentioned that before. It's perfect. But if you have meetings also these days, and when you have parents meetings, sometimes they come up on Teams and stuff, or whatever, Zoom, and they don't really speak English. Or sometimes, if they're lucky, they have a translator next to them. That happens also very often. But you just put on the subtitles. You can change the language, which you switch the language is amazing. You speak, it translates into their target language. That's really very, very useful. So what we've done like a lot, again, translating newsletters and guidelines and things like that for parents to know a bit more what's happening. But it does communication, which is actually not face to face. When they come here and speaking, most people would speak English, but when it's online, it's easier. You have subtitles. If you need, translators, always someone around who can help anyway. But the EdTech tools like these are pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that one. PowerPoint Live too. That's easy, right?
If you do
They can either
presentation,
download the app or just
it
have it
works
up
a bit.
on the screen behind you.
Yeah, it works like Team, doesn't it? A bit of the same. Obviously,
Yeah.
if you Google, you'll probably find other ways to be doing it, I'm sure.
Mhm.
But obviously, Microsoft is pretty handy with these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Kat, did you want us to just send any links in, or did you want me to maybe share a screen, or no, we just talk?
Yeah, if you send anything over,
Send
then
it.
what we can do is put everything in the show notes, and then people can go and have a look afterwards
Awesome.
to any resources or recommended things. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so the last thing really is just kind of for a little wrap up was what piece of advice you would give to teachers really for engaging people's in language learning with EdTech. So one kind of final little summary point of all the lovely things you've said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can start if you want to. I'll be happy with that. I would say if you, as a wrap up, I think obviously we have to. Technology is always a good thing to have. Another very beautiful add up. I do think that I don't want to, praise and sing our praises in language teachers, but I think the language teachers are always quite more advanced with ed tech and things like that. Sometimes a bit
I
more
agree.
than in other departments. You can see that. Maybe I'm going to be, a bit told off by saying that, but I think. Well, I even noticed that during the pandemic and stuff, and it seemed to be we usually had a slight edge over the other departments and stuff at times, which I think. So I think it's using the tools that you have in your hands, provided it enhances uh, learning, but make the language learning fun and create gamification, but get also these nice things that you technology cannot bring. It's not going to cook you a meal, or it's not going to be able to recite you a lovely
No.
poem and do that in front of people. Watching films in foreign languages is a beautiful thing to do and to discover a new culture.
Yeah.
Reading a book in a foreign language, it can be translated, but it's always so much better if you can read it in the original language,
It's
whatever
never
language it
quite the
is.
same, is it?
So I think there's all these things. Technology is amazing. You have all these things you mentioned, to help with dyslexic people, to help with people who don't really speak the same language, to help the communication. But I think as a language teacher, and to make sure that that people keep learning languages, we have to do all these things on the side to entice and make them excited about all these things, and technology used well and nicely. Even AI, obviously, is the way to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
A
I
good
like.
balance.
Mm-hmm. A
Yes,
good
good
balance.
balance. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. I love it. I think my biggest thing is just to tell people to always jump in, right? When you're talking about language learning, acquisition, or just teaching it too, or even with technology tools. And maybe that's just my personality because I don't have to know about how to use it specifically or all the ins and outs of it. But if it's something that I think that could enhance our classroom or bring a different type of learning or engage everybody more or give us a little bit more motivation, I'm in. And so just the same thing that I was saying about the environment before, I would tell students like each year, it's almost like when we first started using Microsoft tools and the notebook was the new thing to come out. And I think I started with the class notebook, OneNote, in either 2016 or 2017. And it was a group of seniors, and these were students in Spanish too, I think. And I was just like, hey guys, I'm not making any more copies. I was just like, we're not doing anything else anymore. Trees, everything is going to be right here. And now I don't have to hear 30,000 excuses about a binder or I don't have this or I lost this paperwork because it's all going to be in this OneNote. And I think when I had a student at that time, I had a couple of seniors in the classroom because the school is not that big, but I had a few. And one of the girls had actually said, oh, Miss Taylor, this is a game changer, And I was just like, yeah, So I was like, you get the buy-in from students and you get really excited
Yeah.
about using it too. And so they would be the ones that even at that time, to help me figure out how to use this, how to distribute the notebook digitally, how to share different pages. And so I think my thing is just jump in to anybody, or even if you're interested in just learning languages,
Yeah.
Just jump in and just try out all the tools that we had. And I love what Jerome said earlier about how language instructors are kind of like the innovators. We don't have to pat ourselves on the back because we are. But I love the fact, and I don't know if this happened maybe in the UK, but I feel like in the States, people started saying this in the classroom a lot, like, you have to be able, like, everybody is a language teacher now. And I was just like, what do you mean everybody's a language teacher? Even though I feel like actual languages, okay, are the originators of that. But people began
Yeah.
to say, oh, you need to be able to speak the language of science, or you need to be able to show your children the language of math, right? Every course became a language. And so I understand that to a certain extent, but I do believe that we are the innovative type and the ones who kind of brought that about. So my final words would be just to jump in and to remember to do what it is that you love to do. When you are learning something, you have to figure out why it clicks. So I would tell my students all the time, because a lot of them, especially high school, they were just like, oh, we like you, but we don't necessarily like Spanish. Okay, thank you for sharing. So I'm just like, well, how am I going to get them to be excited about this? But I would try to share with them, you don't have to have the same passion that I have for languages. It's okay. You don't have to have that same desire or zeal, but you do have to be able to figure out something that's going to make it stick for you. And so I realize everybody learns differently. Everybody's desires are different. So I would encourage anybody, figure out what your hobbies are in your target or your native language, and do those same thing in your target language, right? So Jerome had already mentioned, go watch Netflix. That's easy. You like watching movies, go watch a movie in another language, put the subtitles
Yeah.
on in French, put the subtitles on in Portuguese or Spanish. That's what I would do for Portuguese eventually. So I began putting those things into practice. I enjoyed journaling. My conversation was not all that great, but writing is another fundamental practice of language learning. You have listening, reading, speaking, writing. It's there. So whatever it is that I began to journal, I will put those things into Spanish. I used to do that a long time ago when I first began Spanish. I just wrote it out. So now I do that in Portuguese. Not there for French because it's super rusty, but I will begin doing it again. I enjoy, like I mentioned, I enjoy devotional. So I would find books. I enjoy reading. So I would read those books in English and in Spanish or in Portuguese,
Yeah.
and do those things that you enjoy. So whatever it is that you enjoy doing, make that a part of your daily routine. I like word games. I put that on one of my pages the other day. I like playing Wordle. I like Scrabble. I grew up playing Scrabble, and that's a form of vocabulary. That is reading, that is understanding something. And so now I do that in the other languages. It takes me a good hour to figure out a French one because I'm like, my vocabulary is not there. But I do it. I do it in Spanish. I do it in French. I do it in Portuguese. I do it in English. And my husband helps me in English, of course, but the others, he's just like, you're on your own. I get kicks out of it. But for anybody, do what it is
Yeah.
that you enjoy doing, and it becomes more of a fun habit than a process. And I think that's what everybody is looking like. Oh, I hear it all the time. Oh, I wish I would have learned Spanish, or I wish I would have done this. Okay, you can still do it. You got time. Go get on Duolingo. I know people are not fans of Duolingo. I am, just because I feel like it's consistent. But I feel like you can enhance any tool to what you want it to be.
Yeah.
It's any of the tools that we mentioned too, for Quizzes, for Quizlet, for Ed Puzzle, whatever you want, you make them what they are. So I can only use them so much. I can put in a bunch of flashcards into Quizlet, but then what am I going to do on top of that to really enhance the learning? So that's where the fun comes in at, and that's where the extra push comes in to be able to take it somewhere else. Mouthful. Sorry.
Amazing. That was good. Thank you
That's
both
very
so
good.
much. It's been a pleasure having you both on. And yeah, those are brilliant points to wrap up with as well.
NetSupport School's audio monitoring allows the instructor to monitor audio activity on all the students' machines, and the instructor is automatically alerted to any microphone or speaker headphone activity at the student. You can select students to listen to the audio being played on their devices, and you can record and play that audio back to students. So for example, I have these indicators here on the screens letting us know if the volume of the microphone is being used. If I hover over James, I can see that he's watching and listening to 20 minutes of adorable kittens. However, if I go to Matt, there's no audio being played and no microphone activity occurring on his device. So I know who's active and who's inactive in my class when it comes to the audio or having the volume turned on or off. If they are listening to something and I need to quiet that down, I can mute the sound of the student, or I can go in and I can adjust their volume. So I can actually give them a maximum student volume where they can't go above a certain level, or I can bring their volume down just to nudge them to quiet it down a bit, especially if they have that music blaring with their headphones and people can hear it outside of what they're listening to. What you can also do is you can listen to students, which makes this a great tool for language labs and learning second languages or other activities where you might be recording audio, such as podcasting, videos, or other content creation students might be working on for the class. I can choose a student and select listen, so I can hear what's going on their device. Then I can record what's happening. And I can record for any length of time, whether they're doing a practice activity for a few seconds or for a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let that run. Down below, I can see it's recording James, and I can see how long that recording has been going on. So I'm going to allow that to go for about 20 seconds and then stop the recording. I'm still listening to James, so I've been listening for this long, but the recording is over. And now the recording is available in my recordings file. So I can actually share that recording with James. I can call him up to my desk and walk him through what I heard and my feedback or suggestions. I can correct pronunciation, or I can help him figure out how to better say what he was working on saying for the podcast or the content that he's creating. The Audio Language Lab feature is an excellent tool for any age level, especially if you want students working from headphones so they're not distracting the class, but you want to be able to still listen in and hear what they're doing without having to hover over their shoulders.